Rev up your engines! 2004 Sequoia, and it was one made in Indiana. Originally they made forklifts, they started making the Tundras, big V8 engines. People in Indiana do a pretty good job making cars. I'd have to say, if you want to get a car and it's not made in Japan, well, Indiana's as good a place as any to get it made. That or in Canada, they seem to do the better jobs. Now, why do people buy these vehicles? Because they're humongous. They're four-wheel drive with a V8 engine that can run forever. Yes, they get horrible gas mileage, but anything that big will. That's just the way that it goes. It has 251,000. He's put 151,000 himself on it. He bought it used. Paid 14 grand back then. And if you would have had a crystal ball, no one would have thought that today a new one of these would be $90,000. Yes, indeed. That's why he's keeping this one. As we look inside, he's got some decent seat covers. Things do wear out over time. And of course, there's lots of room. The seats go back. The original wheels on it. Now, it's been a Maryland car, as you can see. Now, he wants me to check the undercarriage, which we're going to do a little bit later, see what kind of shape it's in. There's definitely superficial rust, but these things are pretty solid made. You can hear that's solid, but it's got superficial rust. Personally, something like this, well, it depends what the rest of it looks like, but I would probably have it all sandblasted down, primed, and then coated. But realize this was a Maryland car the whole time. If it had been a Massachusetts car, or a Michigan car, or wherever, with assaults on the road all the time, it probably would be beyond repair unless you wanted to do a frame-off restoration, because they will rot. Superficial rust like this, not that bad to do with. But he even found a guy locally that will rebuild these frames. This particular one, they don't have the kit for yet. They probably will at some point in time, but for a lot of the Tundras and stuff, you can get kits, and you get guys that are pretty good at what they're doing if you do have a rusted out frame, because these are actual frame vehicles. They're not unibody construction, which then you pretty much say goodbye car. This didn't look bad yet. We'll check out more later, but we'll go under the hood. So we'll look under. Here's why people buy them, an I-Force 4.7 liter V8 engine, 200-something thousand miles, doesn't burn any oil. Now, it is an interference engine. He has had the timing belt and the water pump replaced. You don't want to have the timing belt break and destroy the engine, because really, all this mileage, it still doesn't burn oil. These engines have an immaculate lifespan, which is why I detest that Toyota took them out of their Tundras and put in the twin turbo V6, which they have had problems. I forecasted there's problems, and there was problems. Now, these don't really have problems. And as I've told people many times, it's all BS. Don't listen to this hype about EPA gas mileage. Got a customer in Tennessee. He bought the Tundra with the V6 twin turbo. Guess what? He gets worse gas mileage in that than he did in his old V8, because he pulls weight. A V6 engine is not made for pulling weight. You can get horsepower out of it, but turbos, ramming the air in, having to shift up higher, you're going to get horrible gas mileage. So it's actually worse gas mileage than these. And these are gas hogs to begin with. You get a big heavy vehicle, you're pulling something, you're going to get bad gas mileage. Don't live in la-la land. There's no free lunch. You're always going to have to pay for having a heavy vehicle that can pull a lot of weight. AC still works. You can see just about everything on this, other than the battery that's Sears. It's pretty much still original equipment. These things are really well made. You can see from the front, as the saying goes, they don't make them like they used to. The new ones don't have these coolers on them. Toyota says they don't need them. Well, then why did they need them in the first place, right? They're going more for planned obsolescence. They learned from the Americans, you don't make something that goes 1,000,000 miles, you won't sell that many of them, right? These transmissions are going to last a long time because they have extra coolers on them. They just don't put them on now because it's cheaper to make them that way. That's just the truth. They're just giving you a line of baloney. Oh, it weighs less with that cooler, you know. Hey, don't ever listen to them. Just follow the money. And the money means it costs money to put a transmission cooler in. And if you're pulling weight with a V8 engine, you're better off with an extra transmission cooler. So let's get on my big scan tool and see what's cooking inside the electronics. And here we go. Set the Autel here. It's old, so we're going to do manual input. And personally, I like it because check out the four-wheel drive. Look, it's an actual shifter where you put it in. Four-wheel low, neutral, or four-wheel high. Not a bunch of computer crap. Something you pull with your hand that is not going to break. Even the ones with electric motors. The electric motors break. This is very simple. You shift it yourself. I was thinking you could see he had a nice Sony interface. He got rid of the original crazy CD player stuff and has modernized it. There's plenty of stuff for all these Toyotas to modernize them yourself. And we have Sequoia, North America. Oh, but it lets us do topology, so here we go. Now, normally you can't do the CAN topology on an old car like this. Shows how high-tech these things were, even back in 2004. Kind of slow because it's old. It's 44% done now. While we're waiting, we'll just look around. Big old sunroof. Like I said, tons of space. Nice stereo system, especially since he added the Sony stuff. A change holder. I didn't know people even had change anymore. Touch of the armrest. It's not just some center thing you got to lean on. It's got an actual armrest. And while we're waiting, we'll start her up. Typical Toyota starts right up. All right, and the only codes we see are for the brake system. Oh, look at the trouble codes. See what they are. ABS control system fault and a stroke sensor. Fascinating stuff. When this code is memorized, there is no malfunction in the skid control ECU. Okay, so it's got a crazy communication code, but it says there's no fault in the system. His light never came on, and he never had any problems. Okay, this thing is what? It's 20 years old now. You really don't expect those systems to act perfectly, but he's had no problem skidding, no problem with the brakes locking up, so something like that. We'll memorize this, keep an eye on it for future considerations, but when it tells you it doesn't affect it, do you really care? And we'll start her up again. And now we'll go to the main data here, the ECM. Maybe old, but it's got a reasonable amount of data here. It's in closed loop like it should. Now the long-term fuel trim of 1 is adding a little bit of fuel, and the long-term fuel trim of 2 is adding a little bit less fuel. You're never going to have perfection in something this old. It's only off by like 0.5%, so it's not that big of a deal. I can feel a slight rolling in the idle. He doesn't care. It runs good enough. He could put some fuel injector cleaner. That might fix it. You could have a really, really tiny leak in the intake system. Just a little tiny vacuum leak somewhere. No big deal. Mass airflow sensor stable. As you can see, okay, the fuel trim, it's 99.15. 100's perfect. So it's off 0.85. No big deal. Misfires, you can see they're all zeros. 1 through 8. So let's take it for a spin. How's you, my dad? Good thing the AC's working. No backup camera, of course. It's an old car. A giant Sequoia, like a tree. Well, it's going to go over this bump rather easily. He did put Monroe quick struts on it. I'm not a big fan. They seem to wear out fast over time. He just did it, so it should ride pretty good over these bumps. And it is, because it's a big, heavy vehicle. Realize that. I'm just not a fan of those quick struts. They're cheaper made and they tend to wear out too fast. So, we get to a little realm here. It's a heavy vehicle. You do have to push on the brakes to stop it. It's not going to stop like a little light car, but here goes the big V8 engine. Makes a lot of noise. Shifts fine and takes off. Not a race car, but hey, race cars weigh a lot less than this thing does. Still runs strong. Plenty of pickup. Doesn't burn oil. And it handles the curves good enough. Something that's this tall up in the air. The four-wheel drive system still works perfectly fine. Obviously does a lot of turning because he's got a spinner here. Hey, look, it works pretty good too, I gotta say. Hey, I ought to get myself one of these. As you can see, it's got a lot of miles on it. 252,000 and counting. See in here, and I can feel, I still got a lot of life in it. Doesn't burn oil. Shifts fine. Now he wanted me to check out the front end for rust and stuff, so put on the old parking brake. Turn it off. You see rust. But that's relatively superficial. Any of the bare steel parts, if they do start to crack, you gotta replace them. And in the case of this, people will just replace the entire lower control arm assembly if they have a problem. The main problem with this is going to be the bushings will go out. And if the bushings finally wear out on these, heck, you just buy the whole control arm assembly with the bushings, bolt them off, bolt them on. Don't try fixing them, just replace the whole thing. But you can see, the cross member's still solid. Now, here's a big rust bucket here. Right? It's all rusted. Well, that's just a stupid pan cover. It's just a cover. The transfer case, everything, bone dry, no leaks. When you look at the actual frame, you can see. Okay, solid. I would have that sandblasted and primed and then coated. I'd do the whole thing. And if the lower control arms eventually started to have some kind of problems with the bushings or they were getting pit holes in them, then I'd replace the lower control arms. That's the main thing that wears out. You notice the upper control arms are pretty clean because they're up in the air. This gets all the splash and crud. Usually doesn't make it up that high. So there you have it. A Sequoia, like the ancient Sequoias, is aging quite well. Yeah, they're gas hogs. It's just the way that it goes. The frame's still in good shape. Everything on this is replaceable. Let's say eventually the lower control arms do rust and break, or the bushings crack and they start rattling around. Since the new one's 90 grand, a few $100s for parts here and there doesn't sound all that bad, does it? So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.